Hey, we'll go ahead and get started. I don't see anybody looking to get it on Zoom, but if anybody sees someone up there, bring our attention to it so we can get them online. So thanks and welcome for joining us here for the week 6, the panel discussion of our Money Talk series. And we're thankful to have these folks on here. Call them stakeholders. So they've been in this church, they serve different roles, try to get a cross section of different vantage points to kind of reflect everybody else. So we look forward to hearing what they have to say. There are handouts that are on the table if you didn't get one. Also, please remember to sign up on the sheet. The one handout is a description of, there's a description of where the funds that we have invested, which is a 60-40 ratio between equity and bonds, and where they're placed. And then the other one is the actual description of the different endowment funds that we have within the total of those. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And I wanted to open it up with Herb Hockley, who sits on the committee and has a little bit of background as to what we've been doing, and he's going to share with us a little bit of. When we met, we said, well, let's, Herb agreed to be on the panel. I said, Herb, you could just handle what we've been wrestling with would be very helpful. So, Herb.
Morning, everyone. First, I have to say that when Kevin asked me to be involved in this committee, he talked to me a little bit about what he was asked to do. And he said, hey, look, I think this is going to be a short-term thing, maybe 3 weeks, 3 or 4 meetings. And, to be honest, I wasn't really interested in being on a committee, but, Kevin's my friend, and I thought, shoot, I could give 3 weeks, 3 or 4 weeks to Kevin. I should welcome that opportunity. So I gladly accepted. And I think, I was thinking about maybe counting up all the meetings. Maybe you did that.
Yeah. 11 now.
11 meetings. Yeah.
Not that good a friend, is he?
Yeah. But it's actually been a really interesting group to work with, and what we're talking is something honestly that I've thought about, a lot over the years. I was on the investment committee for a number of years, and that evolved into the finance committee. And when I was on investment committee, we were responsible for kind of keeping an eye on the funds included on the sheet. And, I observed over time that the funds were growing. And I also, noticed that there were guidelines that were put in place around what we needed to do with the money and how the money could be used. And, I think what I saw over time was we were using some, but the amount that we were taking out, I think was dramatically small in comparison to how it was accumulating over time. So, even back then I was wondering, well, we're saving up all this money, what are we saving it for? And, could we be doing more with it? And, you guys correct me if I'm wrong about this, but I think the impetus behind starting this committee was, when Ray made at least one motion in a council meeting that I think it started with, hey, we really ought to re-examine how much we're giving to the district, and what's it called, the Church of the Brethren General Board, the denomination. We should be giving more, and maybe at some point also he asked some questions about what we're doing with our endowment. So we, Jeff, I think it was you that decided we were going to kind of take it offline and think about that a little bit. This committee was formed, and when we came together, after we kind of introduced ourselves to each other, we talked a little bit about that concept. And I always saw it as, are we really, is how we're kind of handling our money, is it in line with our faith and this denomination in particular? And I think that's how we all kind of were thinking about it. And Ray is not here, and he actually was supposed to be the guy on this panel, not me, but unfortunately, he's not able to make it. But Ray really kicked us off with a very comprehensive study, multi-year study that he's been working on, that I think started with a focus on the Bible, and asking himself that question, what should we be doing with our money? And then I think he kind of arrived at a conclusion as far as he was concerned about how we ought to think about that. And I think that's where the notions that he made came from. And so he presented a lot of material to us, and we spent, I don't know, 3 or 4 of those weeks in the beginning, kind of hashing through that and getting educated on first what were the biblical foundations behind this position, but then also what is an approach or a methodology that we could consider that really was oriented toward using more of our assets to help people today versus saving it for some kind of unknown need at some point way off into the unknown future. And one of the things that he introduced to us was this idea of addressing the point around how much should we be saving, how long do we need to save for, and what is this unknown future that we're considering. And he introduced a concept that I hadn't really thought about. It was this period of time. I think he called it like a generation or a generational mindset to our saving, and this concept that we should save enough to make sure we're sustainable for a generation. And over the course of that time, the thought would be that, as we're kind of living through this generation, as we're using money, more money will come in, especially if it's, what we're doing and our church is something that people believe should last, it will just kind of continue to generate, over time with new money. And so, he showed us, it's all kind of a big math problem. There's kind of a period of time. I'm doing a lousy job of kind of explaining this, and he would love to share this paper with you all, and it's, I don't know, like a 45, 50-page paper. If you're interested in this stuff, it's kind of a cool concept to read about, but, he identified, I think, 30 years as a generation, and he showed how we could, deplete those funds with the idea of, at the end of 30 years, if there's no more new money coming in, maybe it's time for us to all do something else. And we kind of compared and contrasted that with this concept of in perpetuity, that it would last forever. So that was, something I think we spent a decent amount of time learning about, and on the team, I think we were all kind of trying to comprehend that. And, none of us are financial experts on this team, really, except for Ray. So we thought, well, hey, maybe we should talk to some more people and bring some more folks in that have some expertise in this area. So I remember, I think it was 2 sessions that we had where we brought in a handful of folks to kind of listen to these concepts and, get feedback and, help the team kind of understand whether, these were concepts that were viable. And then also, I think the intent was just to, socialize these concepts a little bit more. So went through that process. And then we were kind of thinking, well, how do we bring this to even more people? Not necessarily an idea that a recommendation about a certain course of action that we should take, but just kind of prepare people to think about this. And then, over time, if there was enough support from leadership and the congregation at large to maybe reconsider what we're doing, how do we prepare people to be ready to make a decision on that on behalf of the congregation? So that's where the idea of this Sunday school series came about. I think our thought was here, we're not necessarily introducing a concept people are gonna be asked to vote on. It was really more about how can we prepare people to think more about this? And, so the thought was we'll lead into that with, Bible study and then after that, we'll kind of begin the dialogue. So this is all part of a process. I don't know how long the process is gonna go. I do know it's, more than 4 meetings. And I think we'll continue to talk about this and figure out what the next steps are. The last, I don't know, probably a month or two, we really focused on trying to get this class set up and running. And then also I know there were some meetings with the leadership team for the church to maybe kind of assess how we're progressing and maybe where this might go in the future. So that's kind of my take on what we've been involved in here. Did I get everything, Kevin? There, is there anything I missed?
No, I think you got it. Yeah. Thanks, sir.
Okay.
So I'm going to go down now, and we're just going to have a quick. I kind of want to do a baseline. Where were you before this series started on a scale of 1 to 10, and where are you now? 1 being you never gave any thought to the endowment. You knew we had an endowment, but it's not something that you gave much thought. And 10 being you thought about it all the time, and it kept you up at night. So before the series started and after. Nancy, we'll start with you.
I definitely did not have any thought about the endowment keeping me up at night. And I feel like I became very well informed about our endowment portfolio and how we use it during my time serving on the church board. So I have to say, in all honesty, I don't know what number I am. Maybe I'm a 5 in the middle someplace, but I don't think I've changed a whole lot.
Thank you. That's right.
Yeah, I think when I first started coming here and I found out that we had an endowment, I was like, oh, that's curious. I've never been a part of a church before that's had an endowment. So it's been something new. So I think before this series, I was probably around a 2 or 3, thinking about it sometimes not often. And then since this Sunday school class started, I've been thinking about it a lot. It's brought up a lot of really good questions for me. So I'm not losing sleep over it. So maybe like 8 or 9.
Okay. Fair enough. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, I also have other things to lose sleep over. I will say, like Herb, I've been thinking about this before a long time. And I mentioned this at a board meeting, so forgive me for this before, but I've had this fantasy of Jesus, the man, walking into the back of our sanctuary, looking around, saying, you guys nailed it. This is exactly what I was talking about. If only you could get that endowment fund of the 4 million, then you would have the keys to the kingdom of God. That just kind of bothers me. But because there's a dichotomy, I love this place, this church. I love what's been done to fix it up. But I'm also told by, is this really what we're supposed to be doing?
Thank you.
Yeah, probably maybe on the upper part of the spectrum. Again, a function of my involvement with the investment committee, but I've been off that for a couple of years now. I did think about it a lot too when we were working on raising funds for the building project, and I was just thinking, well, we've got all this money, how should we be using that? Should that be part of this? And so, yeah, probably on the upper high over the years.
Yeah.
Ken Schaefer. I live in numbers, being a retired CPA. Also, I was a certified financial planner for a little bit and so forth. And I've been on the investment committee prior to being on the finance committee, and now I am on the finance committee as chairman. So I swim in these numbers pretty much. And I would say it doesn't necessarily keep me awake, although this morning I woke up at 5 o'clock and it's singing in my head. But I would say it's obviously up in the upper range, anywhere from 8 to 9. But, the endowment consumes a lot of what, I think of. I work closely with Kendra, the treasurer, and we have some very talented people on the finance committee that I'm very thankful surround me and can provide input and so forth. But I put myself at the top of the range, so to speak.
Great.
Well, I think, I'm probably about a 6 or a 7, partly because I'm on the finance committee. And partly because I've been aware of this endowment for probably 40-some years. And, it didn't start out that way. I was on the board, I think in my 20s, on the resource, commission. And there was no talk about endowment. There was talk about giving and tithing on a regular basis. And then all of a sudden, we became aware that there were some people who thought this church was important enough that when they passed away, they remembered it in their will. And that was a total surprise to some of us, because it was not an intentional effort on the part of this church to start this thing. But as funds accumulated, we came to the realization that we need to approach it intelligently and get it organized somehow. So I appreciate what we've been able to do with it, what we may do with it in the future. I am trying to model myself after people who saw the importance of the church and decided to help it even after they couldn't attend in person. And so that's where I'm at this point.
Ashley.
Before the series, I was probably a 1 or a 2. Kevin emailed to ask to be on this panel, and I had to pepper Jason with lots of questions because I just needed the knowledge of what this is all about. So after this series, I would say I'm more concerned and 5 or 6.
Thank you. I just kind of wanted to get a baseline on that. You probably all have, hopefully, it's risen your awareness level a little bit this series. Thanks for answering that question to get a baseline. So I have a couple of questions for you. We don't have to go down the line on this, but I did prep the panel with the questions, so hopefully it has some responses. But the first question is, what did you learn from this series? And then we're also going to open it up to the audience too as well on this. Does anyone like to start?
And I can start. One of the things I learned is that this issue is far more complex than I originally thought. I think when it comes to what we do with our money, it becomes more complicated when we try to ask that question. What it means to be faithful stewards of the things that we have when we ask that question in community. So the decisions that I'm making, the decisions my family unit is making, that's like one, from one set of convictions. And then when we put that in conversation with many people, it's sort of, it becomes a more complicated process. When we're reading scripture, studying it, trying to interpret it and figure out what that means for us sort of in an ongoing way as a church. There's not going to be sort of a linear, straightforward path. So that's like one of my biggest takeaways. And then also, this entire series is really called into question, well, what is the church? It's this question of what's the purpose of the church? What is the function of the church? When we receive money, what is our responsibility with it? And I think that's like one of the biggest, well, maybe this is evidence of a good Sunday school class. I'm coming away with many more questions. I'm learning how to ask some different ones now.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I had reinforced in my mind that there are some scriptural passages, and one hymn in particular, a verse of a hymn that I'm very uncomfortable with. Take my silver and my gold, not of my what I withhold. And there are sometimes I don't even sing that verse. And her mind, I have to come to the battle. The point is, for me, this Sunday school class has reinforced the difficulty I'm at in separating the way I handle, Linda and I handle finances personally. How that translates to how we as a collective body should handle them. We have a model that we've adhered to and it's worked well for us and our kids. It allows us to help the church. But that model is different than what Ray is proposing. Having trouble. Church should do one thing if we're not doing that in our personal lives.
I'll just build on Craig's comments, and I learned this as part of becoming a certified financial planner. And not every plan fits everybody. You know, if you don't get the background on your client in terms of who they are, what their health is, how many children they have, where they are, what stage in their life they are, whether they're a retiree or whether they're a young family raising children, or whether they have, you know, adult children, or whether they have children going into college. So I don't know that there's actually a cookie cutter form that you can use depending on where you are in your life. Although I look around here, there are certainly a lot of people that, you know, are in that retirement stage and so forth, and where some of these cookie cutter approaches may work. But we have to be very careful which cookie cutter approach we use. So, but I appreciate Craig's comments, and I know where they're coming from.
Yeah, and I think I would build on that a little bit on what Desiree said and Craig said. This discussion has been a reminder for me to be grateful to the fact that people I don't know, people who were thriving in this congregation long before I ever showed up, organized ministry and did ministry in a way that inspired people to remember this congregation in their wills. And as Craig said, and then when it became evident that there was an abundance, other faithful people just figured out a way to manage that in a way that I think does reflect the values of the congregation. That was one of the challenges. Are we managing this in a way that reflects the values of the congregation? Thousands and thousands of dollars have been invested in ministry education for people who are out serving the denomination. Thousands have been invested in partnership entities that have been donated every year to support the work of those entities, and to invest in this building structure that has two profoundly community-facing entities in it every weekday. And that to me just calls for me to be grateful. And the wise investment and the wise handling of these funds over the years has made it so that we now have an abundance so we can even have this conversation to begin with. And I'm grateful for that because I didn't do a thing to make any of that happen.
Thanks, Nancy.
My response to this is a function of my role as church board chair. And you're feeling grateful, I'm feeling anxious because all the comments here are talking about the emotion behind this, the different perspectives. What I worry about, or what I'm most aware of, is what kind of process do we put together that allows us to come together around the decision to do something or to do nothing without damaging the community. Because the communal nature of our common purse, at least our congregational common purse, is holy ground. And we were struggling a little bit in the board meeting last week about making a decision to come with a budget, and I just felt like I needed to remind people, this is holy stuff we're walking on here. Be careful. And so it's not clear to me yet what kind of process is going to take all of this together at some point and say, what would you like to do? The only solace I have is that's when you come on your watch and I'm mine. I'm glad everybody could let me eat and say, stretch you out until I'm off the hook.
Anyone else? Ashley?
I was a little bit in and out of the series, mostly on Zoom, so, but what it did call up the questions to me is in our own family, am I living in a mindset of scarcity or abundance? And I think that again, is more of a question about, we have to start by examining our own practices, and then again, is that going to translate, and what does that mean for the whole body of Christ? And so that's kind of at the forefront of my mind in the series.
Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, a couple things. One, I think part of the challenge here has to do with, I think some of the experiences that we have, with the budgeting process. And I think, you know, over the years, we've been in situations where we've had to cut some budgets in the area of outreach and giving. And one of those areas is with the district. So that kind of begs the question, you know, again, kind of brings us back to, could we be doing more now to help people that are in need now? And can we kind of revisit how we do things, and find kind of a better formula than what we have that does empower us to do more today? One of the things we talked about a lot when we were preparing, during our discussions, you know, this point of, hey, this isn't about our individual situations, you know, we're really, our individual stewardship, our intent is really to try to focus people on the larger body. And, because there could be differences in how, you know, an institution or an organization like this, needs to consider savings versus how we as individuals need to consider that. That being said, you know, just sitting through the sessions, I myself, and I think a lot of other people in the room, kind of, as they were hearing things, were automatically thinking about what they're doing as individuals, and I think that's natural. And I'm guessing probably everyone in the room, especially when, you know, we realize how prosperous we are, is asking themselves, hey, could I do more today than I do today? And so, I mean, I think that felt present to me, or at least was going through my head, you know, during the Bible lesson. So how do we, you know, and then the other thing I've thought about is, you know, can the church kind of serve as a role model for us as individuals? How the church behaves, can that serve as a role model to us as individuals? So again, I like the challenge of trying to figure out a way that we can help more people today. And, you know, if we're having to cut budgets, you know, could we develop a different model that enables us to extract more money from our savings to maintain budgets, especially in the area of giving?
Thank you. I'm just going to pause here and just check in with the audience and see if you have any thoughts or questions. Otherwise, we'll move on to the next one. So there's 3 right here. So if anyone over here raise their hand, but Glenn, we'll start with you.
Well, I think Herb and Ashley kind of hit on kind of the 2 main things that were going through my mind. And one is, as you're going through kind of this process, your personal finances or family finances, and there's one set of goals and one way of approaching things. If you're a business, you have another approach. If you're a charitable organization or church like this is, you have another set of goals and another way to approach it. If you're the investors of these funds, you have another set of goals and approaches to how you handle the money. So we need to be careful not to too much make our church into a business. So we need to be careful not to make our church too much a personal finance situation. And as you said, just as those things kind of creep into our church life, we can take some things from our church life and apply them to our personal life too. So we need to, you know, be careful not to be thinking that this is an investment group. We need to believe that this is not personal finances. We need to keep our goals and our vision at the top and kind of where we fit into that and make where our finances fit into that. And secondly, what Herb just said about the worried about the budgeting process and the deficits. I kind of to me, it would make, it's been a couple years since I've been involved in the budgeting process, but I was for many years. And there was always this huge angst at the end of the year about how to make this budget balance and, oh, we didn't quite make it last year. I'm like, maybe we need to base our giving or our budget like on a set percentage or something of our total net worth. And then kind of count on the donations to replenish that rather than try to budget from year to year and kind of anticipate what we're going to get. And oh my God, we didn't get that much and we overspent or underspent. Now we have this excess. What do we do with that? Just work out of your common pot to meet those expenses rather than to make your budget try to, don't worry so much about making that budget. Your budget is only a projection of what you think, where you think you might be spending your money over the next year. It's not something that you need to stress about, like, are you overspent or underspent here or there. It's really only a projection, and you have to kind of work with what you got. So take an approach to the budgeting process.
Yeah, I love that. It's kind of a different approach than, what Ray presented, but to me, I think, when I think about next steps is, how do we figure out what is the right answer? First of all, do we need to make changes? Do enough folks believe we need to change how we're doing things to align more with the congregation's faith? And then if the answer is yes, then let's figure out what is better versus just kind of doing everything the way we're doing it, the way we've been doing it for years and years and years, and assuming that that's the right way.
I don't mean to hog the floor, but kind of the corollary to that is that, I think giving patterns have changed over the last 40 or 50 years too. And if you look at how businesses in our local community operate, you don't have families or individuals that own large businesses and that are routine large givers to charitable organizations. So you're going to have more of a fluctuation in that income from year to year because you don't have that stability of a larger, business owner population or business owners within the population. So you're going to have, the funds are going to come in spikes more so than maybe they did 30 years ago. So you need to accommodate for that in your planning process.
Yeah, and Glenn, you're kind of segueing into our next couple of questions. So we're going to kind of remember what Glenn said here as we move into the third and fourth question. But Damon and Sue had a comment, their hands raised.
Yeah, I got an email from Ray Leckrum. Yeah, he couldn't be here, but one of the things that he mentioned was, he says, I think the primary question is, why are we investing large sums of money in large profitable corporations in the first place? For long periods of time. They're using between 90 to 90%, 96% of the endowment to generate huge profits for themselves. And we only get 4% of that. And that's sort of his big question. That means that 90 to 96% of our funds are used to be making money, not helping the needy. And you all probably heard this, but I'm not sure everybody else has. And he was saying, I guess he checked with the people at the balance fund where we have most of our money, and top people are Microsoft and Apple and Amazon and Alphabet, which is sort of a Chinese conglomeration of things, United Health Group, and various other people. And do they need our money? Should we be giving our money to them to manage and make a amount of money and we get a little bit? I think that was his main concern. How are we using the funds that we have well? And I'm just said that on behalf of
I think that the point is just that we have our money invested in mutual funds. And the stock component of mutual funds includes stock in Apple and Microsoft and on and on and on and on. So we, by way of our mutual fund investments, own stock in those companies. And Ray objects to that.
Yeah.
I have one question. What you have listed here, that's a value, does that add up to the total endowment that we have?
I just got that this morning. I didn't see the total. It should be,
Yeah, it should be.
That's what it is.
yeah.
It's not, it's not moving it itself.
Right.
That's right,
That was my question.
it says that up.
Okay.
And how much does that have? I don't know.
1.7,
20,
20, yeah,
1.8.
yeah. And so I want to go, you had your hand raised earlier.
I just want to mention, first of all, I really appreciate all the people doing the nuts and bolts of the money around here, but I do none of that. But this is also an opportunity to think creatively. Sojourners Magazine, which I didn't get a chance to read, it just got here, but the November issue. The theme is good news about money, how to embrace God's economy of generosity. And just looking at some of the subtitles here, can money serve as a gift in God's economy of generosity rather than a commodity that leads to inequity? And talking about the church inspired a radical moral imagination that could tell a better story of money. An opportunity here to, think creatively. This might be a good article. Sojourners is pretty cutting edge on things like this. Wish I had a chance to read it, but I didn't. But anyway, putting it out there. Sojourners in November.
David?
A factor that I guess you alluded to was funding. I wanted this to underscore. I've noticed in my research of congregational experiences across the nation that there is a dramatic shift in how individuals are contributing. It's a generational thing. My generation thinks in terms of giving 10% of my income, and we try to do that. There are many in my generation who have rebelled, who say, well, I'm going to give a portion of my money, but not 10%. Okay, that's an individual choice. But the younger generation don't think that way at all. They think more in terms of patterns. I'm going to give to who I want to give to. And I'll spread it around the way I want to. I don't trust the church to do it right, basically. I'm going to do it the way that makes me feel good. That underscores what you're saying and amplifies the problem. I want to come back to the language of feeling, the jet flag. That's where some of the danger comes in, and that has to do with, it isn't simply a matter of mathematics. That is an important part of it. It's a critical part of it. But there are also these feelings, and that's what's driving the younger generation, evidently. And my issue of concern in this area has to do with, as we make a decision, I have no clue what that is. That's not my field. My field tends to be more in terms of working at the issue of relationship, and that involves feeling. My concern comes at how do we look forward to the time when we no longer have these steady givers? Or do we try to put more emphasis to illuminate the reason why that isn't positive way to go? I don't know. I don't know how to go at that. But we've lost the momentum of maintaining thought process of tithing.
I think that's fascinating because you've identified something that is part of my generation. And I was brought up in a generation where they got to your feelings from the pulpit and they said, give 10%. And I did that for years on my gross income. And then I'm looking back and reflecting, I don't know where this is going. And this wasn't Church of the Brethren. But what drew me to Church of the Brethren and was the peacefully, simply together. But I absolutely feel like I'm still alive. I'm kind of somewhere in the middle, 10%, but also I want to know where my money's going. So I feel like with our generation, trust has to be gained. I want to just completely give to this congregation and know that we're doing good with our money. So I also think it's interesting, like peacefully, simply together. I'm so sold on that. And then our tagline is peace, service, and openness to all. And I really align with that. And how can we move forward? I don't know. We have any follow-up.
Thank you.
Well, I know I was on stewardship with Craig and we went to a meeting and talking about the young generation. So going back to, I read 47 pages and I was the first to admit that by stage 2, I will have already stopped reading. But that was one of the things they were looking at, the younger generation. And I think the other thing is back at we now have all these other social agencies. All you have to do is look at Extraordinary Gift and look how that has grown from when it first started, the number of nonprofits. So I think getting back to you, you go and you say, okay, I support this organization, where in the past you used to be the church. So getting at, and I'm probably not getting this right, on raised generational, we can't assume the generation that behind us is going to be given the same way, because our generation was born taught that there's something that's still sort of in my mind you give. I would be looking more at, as a person, the numbers person, having a fluctuating, taking out when we have a good investment here where our profits, we take out more. And then maybe we fund more to organizations, or we keep that in and with the goal that when the years are bad, we take out, so nobody that we normally, and that may be the better way, nobody that we normally give X amount to, this is a bad financial year, we haven't met our budget, so we're gonna take more out. That's stable. That adds complexity here to your, so you may be adding another 22 meetings.
Actually, go ahead and move on.
Yeah, we touched on this series a little bit in terms of not living in fear of what is the next generation coming up. And I think Peggy kind of touched on like number sense, and this is how you do it. And it doesn't sound like it's based in your anxiety about the future. So all good things to wrestle with.
Great, Desiree, please.
Okay, sorry, last time. Also millennial down here, and my generation and those that are younger than mine, you know, I'm a seminary student. One of the things we talk about is the state of the church, the state of things. And my generation and generations under mine, generally are not as interested in institutional religion, the widespread trend. So no, my generation is not going to give as much because my generation is not at church as much. And this is sort of a generalization. This is happening in the West, so North America and Europe, whereas the church is growing a lot in global south, so like Latin America, Africa, Asia. But one of the, you know, another piece to this is that millennials and the ones younger care a lot about truth. And so maybe not institutional religions, they don't care, we don't about, you know, maintaining things as they are. But there is sort of a general interest in, you know, what is the true way to live? What is personal truth? It's more relative and stuff. And I think how that may relate to this conversation is people who are younger are really interested in seeing churches that have actions that align with their values. So that the second that a church, you know, looks like it's not doing that, you know, a little bit smells like hypocrisy, younger generations are not interested. They're very quick to leave. And I say that sort of, you know, from personal, you know, anecdotal experience. A lot of my friends have been very happy to kind of walk away from church altogether. And so I sort of bring that with me too, to this. Money in my generation is not the same. Giving is complicated, I think, I mean, across the board, but I think the things that motivate and sort of that intrinsic, you know, what does it mean to live a good life? I think it's different. It calls up different things for younger people.
Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
While that discussion was going on, I was thinking about the letter that you wrote and what you had just talked about, that your generation can sniff out that hypocrisy. And that's important to them. And I'm glad you I wasn't going to call you out, but that you mentioned that. Next question for the panel. I'm going to kind of combine this. I'm going to combine these two questions. Is it worth the energy to change, and should we do things differently?
Yes, I think so. I think we have an opportunity. I think we have a congregation with a lot of intelligence, a lot of commitment, a lot of compassion. Is it worth the work? Yes, it is. Because I think the way we try to do ministry is a way that does speak to the world. I think it's part of human nature to want to be connected to something, to belong to something, and to be part of a winner. And how do you make a winner? You align with the things that the world needs and that resonate in people's hearts. And if you invest your money in a way that supports that and reflects that, I think it's appealing. And I think it will continue to draw people in who will continue to be inspired to give and will perpetuate the thing. I fully support this effort. I think it's wonderful to walk up to this question and do the work to answer the question. I think a process will come, Jeff. I think somehow we'll have very smart, committed people, and we already have a committee that's wrestling with this and taking time to listen. And I don't know that it's our job to come up with what should we do. You know, if you'd asked me, I'd have a million ideas on how could we do it differently. Should we do it differently? Yes, I think we need a completely new attitude about our investments and how we handle them and what we do with them. And what that looks like, you can ask me about some other time.
One of the things that Ray always stresses is that, you know, the investments are part of it, but all financial aspects are kind of interrelated. So one thing I didn't mention earlier when I was talking about what we've done, I mean, we've had conversations about, you know, the budget as it relates to this. We talked about the conduits and what's going on with the conduits. And I think all of this, needs to just be re-examined and make sure that it aligns with, you know, our values, our kind of core values that we communicate in our mission statement, our tagline and all that.
Well, and an extremely high percentage of our annual budget is allocated to our staff and supporting our staff, the benefits, the retirement plan, all of that, and our building. It used to be something close to 80%. I think it probably still is. Extremely high percentage. And we all need to keep doing our annual giving to continue to pay our staff and to pay the heating bill. The discretionary part of our annual budget is minuscule. Whether that's right or wrong, I don't know, but that's how it is.
The committee or the panel?
Maybe I'm getting far afield from the question, but building on what you said, again, this came up in the board meeting the other night. We do spend an inordinate amount of money on ourselves. You know, look at that, on our staff, on our building. That staff in that building, you would break down how much of their efforts for the building support goes to outside entities other than ourselves. The people who use this building every day of the week. That has to be put over in the column of outreach and witness. It can't, it's not just, we just want to have a nice pretty building. So that needs to be in that mix.
Good point. Craig.
I'm going to build on what Jeff said a little bit. I have the value of working with this congregation for like 7 decades. And yeah, we do spend a lot of money, leadership, pastors in the building, and we always have. But when I look at what that has taught the membership as the generations have flowed through this building and watched what they have done outside this in their personal lives, that investment is well worth it. Many people coming out of this congregation have had major influences on the rest of the world in some cases. And if I'm investing 80% of my contributions in doing this, and my contributions to teach people that they can go out and do that, I'm happy to do it.
Well, I know in the past, I'm down in the weeds all the time and so forth, unfortunately. But a lot of our investments traditionally have been in the balanced fund, and that's it. And the balanced fund is like 60% equities and 40% fixed income. So Ader has come up with a lot more choices that we could reallocate funds to. I'm not saying we should reallocate funds at this point. We have to wait until the results of your review come in. But there are opportunities. I mean, it's been that way for years and years and years and years and years. And but that's down in the weeds, so to speak. That's just the mechanics of it. Once we may do some kind of reallocation. And that's just a thought from my standpoint, only because we've been there. We haven't changed that formula in years. And so.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, there's.
I also think that, this is work that reconsider what it is that we're doing with the money that we have invested, and to think creatively about it. Even as we sort of like inherited, this endowment, some of us definitely were around like when this happened all these years ago. Was it the 90s that it happened? That between us, I don't know. But I think like this is the body that's tasked to imagine or reimagine what it means to be good stewards of what we have. And I think, there's a lot of, I think that this is a church that is so well versed in practicing in practical ways the values that we say and that we collectively hold together. And I think the status quo is not really our thing. Protecting the status quo isn't something that this church generally does. I think our church is often at the forefront of some of the more cutting edge issues and speaking to Christian nationalism most recently, and investing lots of money. I think of back in the 80s with the refugee crisis that was in this community, we had a lot of refugees and our church was doing so much. Many decades ago, we were working through the question of inclusion and what does it mean to be inclusive. And all of these things speak to me of how practical our love is as a congregation. And I think that this is, one more angle that we can work through. And so maybe it's because I'm young enough, but I think it's worth it and I think that there's energy here to make the changes.
Thank you. I'm going to ask the final question. Given the large amount of money that cannot or should not be expended in its entirety immediately, what is the end point for the total expenditures of the funds? 10 years, 30 years, 75 years, or indeterminate end time? Forever.
Okay, I'll take this one. Again, I'm down in the weeds, but Bob Hollinger was very nice enough that he put together back in 1998. I believe 1998 was the first year in which we had a $100,000 contribution that went into the endowment funds. Now, I don't remember what the purpose was. But anyways, that 30-year period is very interesting. It was mentioned earlier. I'm looking at a 30-year period beginning in 1998, running through 2022. Contributions to the endowments at that point, for that period, 30-year period, were $1.5 million approximately. And again, I haven't audited these numbers, or they haven't been reviewed by anybody. Interest earned or revenue was $858,000, again, for that 30-year period. Unrealized gains were $1.4 million. And then there's a category called transfers, and I'm not sure what that is, $107,000. Okay, well, unrealized gains are the difference between your cost basis and what the market currently is and so forth. So we did well, okay? The balance fund, what, over that 30-year period. And out of that, was expended 2.1 million, which left about 1.7 million today. That's what we had. So you can see that in what I would consider to be incoming funds with real unrealized gains were 3.8 and 2.1 went out, leaving 1.7 today. As of, 9:30, whatever, around that period. So I just wanted to share that. That's relative, and that's over a 30-year period. So you can see that we still got a lot of money, and that actually includes a bunch of money that went out for the facility project, the upgrade, about 600,000 or whatever it was. And that again is up through 2022, the end of the year. So that's just the perspective of history. Unfortunately, you cannot project history to the future. And we're talking about the future here, okay? We're talking about the future. So we may see with whatever programs or changes we make, we're gonna see a lot more going out faster than over a 30-year period. So, like I think about cycles in life. This church was formed in 1902, right? Elizabethtown Church of the Brethren. And this building, I believe, was built in 1954. Anyways, those are long periods of time. But really, we only started tracking the endowment in 1998. So I asked myself, what happened to all those years prior to 1998 to go back to 1902? So anyways, that's just a little bit of history on top of where we're trying to go in terms of where we need to be a little more transparent and accountable for how we spend these funds.
Well, and Kevin, your question to me, the question is the clinical, analytical, financial management sort of question. And back to John David's point, to me, there's a real emotional component, or there's a faithful component. We are a faith community called to do God's work in the world. And I think we've done our level best with the management of the funds the way we have so far to be true to that calling and to share what we have. And now we have even more than we had when some of these things were conceptualized a number of years ago. And that's why I believe supporting the question of what do we do now is very important for this faith community. I don't care how long it takes to spend the thing. What I would care more about is, are we asking ourselves questions enough on some repeated basis of what is a ministry investment that better equips us to serve our community and to be faithful into the world the way we understand we should be. And how long that takes to me is irrelevant. As long as we push ourselves and hold ourselves accountable to ask the questions and seek the answers regularly. That's where I would be.
Yeah, thank you. This is definitely the congregation that likes to ask questions, and that's a good thing. It's a good thing. A lot of places it's not like that. Any other comments or any thoughts on? Yes. Dave.
Yeah,
You're right here.
yeah, my,
Get it off my feet.
At this point in time, today, I'm not necessarily in favor of spending down the endowment totally. I may feel differently about that 10 years from now. I don't know, as things change. But I was at the board meeting on Tuesday, and it's clear to me that offerings do not always make expenses. We struggle with that. So I'm in favor, and I think it's been suggested, but I'm also in favor of coming up with some kind of formula or strategy that would help us use the endowment, maybe part of the budget, maybe not, but use the endowment to empower us to do the ministry we're called to do that reflects the values that people were suggesting. So I think I've repeated some things, but the more we talk about this, maybe the more we can move into a consensus.
Thanks, Dave. And yes, we'll finish with Dave.
Okay, one thing, when Ray first brought this up, one of my concerns is that I have money in Ager because Sue and I were pastors. And I'm concerned about environmental concerns. I called Ager and said, do you have any funds at all to deal with my concerns about environment? And they said, no. They have nothing that deals with the environment and taking care of the earth. And Everett's down the road here has a green fund, and they have, you know, we should look outside of Ager to consider, are there places that meet our values? We don't have to stay with Ager. That there are other people, there are other funds that are doing environmental things. And maybe other concerns we have as well.
A lot more to discuss and think about. And I want to wrap it up. Thank you so much for joining this panel. Thanks for being part of the panel. You did a great job. And we'll ask them if we can to put the chairs back on the stand.
And some around the table.
And fill up you can fill up around the table. More will be coming. We'll be giving a progress report at the council meeting. Thank you so much for joining us.